Hi, I'm Brian Kane. Thanks for watching. This is the second video that I'm putting out that's about AI and design. So today I want to start with synthetic versus simulated because I think that that's an important topic. Now, when you think about artificial intelligence, there's a lot of energy and effort that's gone into doing a perfect replica of human intelligence, or to try to create a perfectly simulated human experience. And that's interesting, but I'd like to make the case that it may be less interesting than it appears to be, because I think that there's a lot more value in the artificial side of the equation. And let me use a good example for that. Think about electronic music. When electronic music first came out, it was very rough and very raw, and people had a dream of creating a perfect replica of an existing instrument. For instance, a perfect replica of a piano. And through many, many years, they eventually achieved that. But the end result of that is not that interesting. It's certainly useful, and they are on the market, and people use them all the time. But you wind up with something that's a perfect replica of something that already existed. Along the way, as electronic music was developing, they discovered a lot of new sounds and a lot of new types of composition techniques and recording techniques and new things that hadn't existed before. And that generated a lot of interest because it was new and it's exciting and innovative. And that is what ultimately led to whole new genres of music that have many, many followers. And to this day, they're electronic musicians. And I would argue that that came from the syntheticness of it. So now when you think about artificial intelligence, you can see that it might be the syntheticness that becomes interesting. So it's not that it replicates our decisions or identifies things exactly the way we do, but that it does it in an artificial manner. Another example of that are fantasy movies that are so popular right now. So you think about the Marvel movies and comic book hero movies, and we're taking all of these special effects, but we're not necessarily creating a perfect replica of the existing world. We're taking our technology and we're creating an enhancement or a synthetic world that we can put ourselves into. And that becomes really, really interesting. And if you think about it just in terms of narrative and what people are interested in, we want to go to these new places. We want to experience these worlds that are otherworldly or that have something new and different in them. And so using artificial intelligence, we can do that. We can create an experience that's new and otherworldly, and that starts to have a lot of value. Another example of that is, for instance, Pixar. When they go to make their movies, they intentionally keep the characters slightly cartoonish, or sometimes very cartoonish, because if they make perfect characters, they're less interesting than these cartoonish characters that we can imagine going into their world, or maybe even them coming into our world, but they're still unique and cartoonish. And so that starts to become interesting when you think about, for instance, if you have a talking interface, should it speak back perfectly to you, or should it have a cartoonish or a character-like feel to it? And it's arguable that the one that's a little bit gated back from being perfectly natural might be more interesting and entertaining to interact with. So we have a lot of history and knowledge to build with from the worlds of entertainment and movie making that we can bring to the table as we go to make these new artificial intelligence products. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of using technology wrong, because I think that there's a lot of value in that. And the best example that I can think of using technology wrong is scratching records. You're not supposed to go back and forth on the turntable and scratch a record. That you were taught not to do that when you got a record player. But people did it anyways. And when they did it anyways, they discovered that it created a whole new sound. It's really fun, created a whole new genre of music. And that genre of music, turntablism, rap, hip-hop, has turned into the dominant music genre today. And that all started from people doing things wrong. Happy accidents come from experimentation, and they also happen when technology goes from being very, very expensive and difficult to gain access to when it becomes a commodity technology, and it's very, very common. And we see this a lot. We saw this especially with things like laptops and computer graphics hardware and software that was very, very expensive and only a few people could use them. It was very rare, to something that's very, very common, and everybody could start making new things. And when everybody can start working with different technologies, they get a lot more innovative and a lot more playful, and new genres and techniques start to come out of that. That's about to happen with AI, which is one of the reasons that I encourage people to get into it now. There's a lot of tools and techniques that you can use that are very inexpensive, and you can get your hands on them now. And in addition to that, there are new products that are coming down the pike that are going to continue to get less and less expensive, and AI is about to become a commodity product. So the more we can get hands on with that, make mistakes, try things that may or may not work, the better chance that you're going to have of discovering something that's unique and new and that has a huge value. The next thing I'd like to talk about is, why do we love pets? It's a really interesting question. One of the reasons I think we love pets is because they do things that are unexpected. And a good example of that is your cat jumping up and walking all over the keyboard and getting in your face. And as much as that's a pain, we generally love that, and we think it's really cute. Dogs, cats, all of our pets tend to do things without us asking them to do it. They do it on their own. And we find that endearing. It's something that we actually like, because there's this creature in our life and we have a relationship with it, and that relationship is not always perfect. We also talk to our animals, which makes no sense, because we know intellectually that they don't understand what we're saying, and yet we continue to do it. So they provide to us someone that we can talk to, even though as humans, we don't need to have them speak back to us. And that's a very important thing to think about, especially when you're talking about interfaces that we're going to talk to. Our pets also require a lot of work. They're not hassle-free by any stretch of the imagination. We need to feed them, we need to walk them, we need to take them to the vet, we need to spend time with them. They are not effort-free, and it's arguable that we put a lot of work into it, and they don't necessarily do anything in return for that work that we put in. Even though we feel that they provide love and care and tenderness and companionship for us, they're not doing something in exchange for that work. Now, when we think about different types of machines, that's a very different type of relationship. We generally expect that if we do something, we're doing it for a reason, and it's going to return some value to us. We generally don't have machines that we just constantly spend time fixing and tweaking and manipulating just to get nothing out of it. And yet, if you think about our relationship to these artificial intelligence devices, they may require that. So it may be that we want to design something that requires someone to have a regular set of interactions with it, that requires some maintenance. And a good example of that are the Tamagotchi pets that were popular about 15 years ago. And those were devices that, sort of like a game, but it was also like a mini pet, where you needed to spend a decent amount of time taking care of it, or else the product didn't work. And people really got attached to that. It became a very, very popular trend. And so that's something to think about. What is this relationship that we have with pets, and what's the value that we get out of it? Because we may wind up relating to these AI products in different ways that aren't necessarily just a helper. It may be a companion. Now, the last thing that I'd like to talk about in this regard is this thing that I call companion mode. If you think about the way a lot of these voice-enabled products are developing or evolving currently, they require an invocation word. So you say, Alexa, or you say, okay, Google. And that indicates to that machine that you're ready to have a verbal interaction with it. But what I think of as companion mode is where that device would simply be on, and it has the ability to interrupt the flow of the room and the conversation in the same way that a cat, without any request, can jump up on your keyboard and start walking around. This is a little bit of a controversial idea, but I think that it has a lot of value, especially if you have the ability to turn companion mode on and turn companion mode off. However, I think that it feels more interesting and more friendly to have a device that can make decisions and contribute to a conversation on its own. I think that this is something that needs to get experimented with, and it's the kind of thing that we can simulate now to do user experiments to find out how people respond to that. It's very, very different than having to request something and then get a result. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about is the need for interaction standards, especially for cars. As AI products and intelligent products start to become a regular feature of our lives, I think that we're going to need a set of universal standards that let people understand what the level of intelligence of the product that they're interacting with is, and that currently does not exist. But I think it's going to become very, very important as these start to be in our lives in different ways. Here are a few things that I think are going to be very important for us to be able to instantly identify anywhere in the world with any of these products. Is this product smart or not? Is this an intelligent vehicle or is it a manual vehicle? And I think that you're going to want to be able to identify that just by looking at it, potentially even from a block away. And the same may be true of toasters and vacuum cleaners or cameras or any of the myriad of things that we interact with. As they become smart, we should know that they are smart just by looking at them. Is the device on or off? So there's a lot of concern about devices that are invading our privacy, or if people don't know if they're recording or if they're being looked at. So we want to know, is the device on or is it off? And it seems very, very basic, but there's a lot of black box products that are coming out now. So I think we want to have some type of standard so that we know this is an intelligent device and it's on. Next thing I think we want to know is it in smart mode on? Or is the smart mode off? Now, a good example of that might be you're walking down the street and you see a vehicle coming at you. Is that an intelligent vehicle? That's the first thing that you want to know. But the next thing that you want to know is it in its autonomous mode? And depending upon whether it's in manual mode or whether it's in autonomous mode, it's going to behave differently. And so you're going to interact with it differently. And that should all be recognizable really from a block away. And a good example of that is if you're in the city and you're looking at cars driving down the street, you can differentiate between a taxi and a regular car easily. So these standards haven't really been developed yet, but I think that they're important that they are developed. And as I said, it applies to cars as well as all sorts of other types of products. The next thing I think needs some type of indicator is whether or not the device is listening, looking, and sensing the environment. So there's a lot of nervousness these days about devices that listen or watch. And people, I think in general, want to know when they enter a space, is this a monitored space or is this a non-monitored space? And it may be that the device itself needs to tell you instantly just by looking at it that yes, I'm on, yes, I'm smart, and yes, I'm monitoring. The next thing that might be an interesting feature, and I'm not so sure about this, but who's in focus? So if I'm in a car, for instance, an autonomous car, who is the person that is in charge of what the car should do? So let's say that there's 3 or 4 people in the car and everybody's fighting about where to go. Well, there's probably going to wind up being one person that's the person that's in focus, and they're the ones that decide. So if you have one person saying, I want to go to the supermarket, and one person saying, I want to go home, the car needs to decide who's in control, who's the focus person. And that may be something that would require an indicator so that people know I'm in focus or I'm not in focus. And you can also see that in terms of it might be appliance in your house. If the smart TV is deciding what show to put on, or there's some smart lights that are trying to decide where to put the light, and there's multiple people, it needs to decide, and you might want to know that you're the person that's in focus. And then finally, and this goes in a different direction, but people are now starting to have a lot of interactions with bots and different types of AIs, in particular online in chat bots or in social media or emails or voice message systems when you make phone calls. So there might need to be some type of universal indicator that could be visual, it could be audio as well, that indicates that this is a real human or you're talking to a bot now. And that might help to alleviate a lot of the confusion right now when people are interacting with different companies through their online systems and they're not really sure if they're talking to a real person or to a bot. And this loops back to what I was saying earlier, where they're trying so hard to make it seem that you're dealing with a real human, that can actually work as a negative. If you think that you've been dealing with a human, then you find out that it was a bot. That could potentially be a negative experience. So I think that there might be some type of universal graphic indicator for bot or not, or human or not. So the next topic I'd like to talk about is one size does not fit all. Now, why do I say this? Because currently there are a few big personalities that are being made for everyone. You've got Siri, you've got Alexa, you've got Google Home, you've got Cortana, but everybody gets the same character. Everybody gets the same Alexa, everybody gets the same Siri, and you can't make any changes to their personality. And that's interesting, but people really like things that are personalized. So my prediction is that as time goes on, that these are going to start becoming more and more bespoke in terms of personalities, that you'll be able to either make your own or trade or buy new personalities, and people will customize them both for themselves and for their friends, and that it's not going to be just one Alexa that everybody uses, but there'll be many, 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 many different characters and personalities. One of the things that those products rely on at the moment is that they generally rely on the cloud in order to function. So when you talk to Alexa, you make a request and it goes out to the cloud and it returns your answer and you get that. However, things are moving very quickly to a model where they no longer rely on the cloud and you can have your AI service locally. It's a new technology. There's some USB devices that I've seen that are coming to the market shortly. And also you've got more processor power and software inside laptops and phones and stuff like that. So we can start to move away from the dependence upon the cloud. And when that starts to happen, then that means that you can start to have much more customized, personalized pieces of software and characters and personalities that can be shared or that can just be for you. And I think this is a natural development for the technology to move in. So to me, this is a shift to bespoke personalities. And to me, that's a natural progression. I think that we see that in almost every type of consumer product that comes out. People do like to have things customized, whether it's their car or home entertainment system or their Facebook page or social media presence. People do like to have things customized and they want them to feel personalized. So it's a natural transition. Another shift that's natural to happen is that not just the personalities that are going to deliver this experience to you, but the models that are behind them can start to become bespoke. So what does that mean? So if you think about the large companies that are trying to deliver to you these experiences, they're trying to create a product that has the most answers for the most amount of people. And so they're focusing on very, very large problems. However, there are a lot of really interesting data sets that are out there that are less interesting to large groups of people, but yet still might be very interesting to small groups of people. I just recently saw that there's a giant database of sewing patterns that was recently open sourced and put online for anyone to use. So you can imagine that you could take this gigantic database of sewing patterns and apply some AI to it, train a model on that, and start to have some deep understanding of textile patterns and apparel patterns. And that's going to appeal to a small group of people, but it could appeal to a small group of people in a very big way. Now, that might not be the kind of thing that one of these larger companies has an interest in. However, as an entrepreneur, you can find pieces of information, chunks of data like that you can turn into an AI product that will have a large appeal to a smaller audience. So I think there's some really big opportunities to do that. And again, that's what I call a bespoke data set. You can think of them as these knowledge bundles. So you might want to get this AI for this particular narrow piece of knowledge, or this data set, or this interface for this particular piece of data. And those can start to become very, very specialized and may not be the domain of the larger companies to deliver that. You might want to get that from a third party, or you might want to get that from a smaller company, or maybe you want to purchase that as a download so that you can run that locally in whatever type of machine that you're running. So there's knowledge bundles, and then there's character packs. And the character packs could get added on top of any of these other services. So you could get a character pack for Google at Home, and that includes the pirate voice and maybe a pirate character that shows on the screen, and you could make those and share them. So between these knowledge bundles and character packs, I think that these are going to be two emerging markets that are going to hit very, very soon. And there's a lot of opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurs to create companies around. Next thing I'd like to talk about is media evolution. And this is a very simple concept. But if you think about the evolution of still images, when still images started to turn into moving images, with the invention of film and photography about 150 years ago, we created a whole new type of storytelling. That was a significant shift when we went from still image to moving image. Now, think about objects. What's happening right now is that we're going through a transition where we think of objects as being static objects, but now they're going to start to be moving objects. So we're creating a whole new type of storytelling where we have moving objects in our life on a daily basis. We're going to be interacting with them, and those objects are going to be interacting with other animated objects. And we are going to be part of this narrative that's constantly around us. which in many ways is very, very exciting. So we can think of the world as becoming a lot more fun because any given product that we think that we know about, all of a sudden it can be a whole lot more fun. It can be interactive, and the objects in our life can start to tell us stories and take on characters and lives of their own. That's actually an incredibly exciting opportunity. And I don't think that anyone has any experience with that. Maybe some of the engineers at Disney or very, very few people. But in general, for human beings, this is a fundamentally new type of experience that we're getting into. We don't really know what it's like. And it's a great opportunity because we can test that out. We don't need these AI devices to be actually even real. We can simulate them with remote controls. But we can test and see how people respond to them and try to figure out the way that they should be created so that people really like them, and then take that and make the final products later. But it's really exciting to think about. This is a fundamental new type of storytelling and human experience that we're getting into as objects start to become animated. So you had moving pictures, now we have moving objects. Change topic here a little bit. So right now, one of the issues that we're having is that AI may be going through its GMO moment. Now, what do I mean by that? People are starting to be scared by this emerging technology. There are stories in the news, there are science fiction movies coming out. They're hearing things that this may not be great. They feel as if it could be a threat to them. And the risk is that from a public relations standpoint, people just start to hear the word AI and think negative. I could even see the possibility that people could start to have AI bans coming down the road, regardless of whether or not they know anything about it. It just becomes this term AI and people become allergic to it, much in the same way that people are allergic to the term GMO. Now, I'm not going to debate whether or not GMOs are good, bad, or otherwise, but I think it's safe to say that there's a large segment of the population that has this sort of allergic reaction to the term GMO, and anytime you bring it up, it's just instantly negative. And there's the possibility, given a lot of the press and stories that are coming out, that people may have that same response to AI in the very near future. So there's a potential backlash that's brewing, and I think that people that are getting into this now need to be aware of that. My personal thought on that is that it's a great time for creative people to start making really fun experiences that are not scary and that don't reflect any of these worries that people are concerned about. There's so much potential for making these incredible fun experiences that I'd prefer to win on the fun side. That's my take on it. So I think it's important to make fun, social, useful experiences for people that are not threatening, that are really exciting and fun, that they desire. We want to make things that people desire, and that's typical of any type of UX design anyways. I think it's a great time to get in, and I think that the most fun things will win at this point in the technology development. So because it's an unknown thing, and because there's a lot of room for innovation, and also because there's a lot of this fear-mongering going on, I think that the most fun things are the ones that people are going to gravitate to, and I don't know what that is. Recently, Google made an application where you could take a picture of yourself and it will tell you what classical painting you look like. Yesterday, I saw one that said, take a picture of you and see what you look like as the opposite sex. So these are kind of interesting things, and they make people comfortable with using this technology. So whoever makes the most fun thing is probably going to win. There's a lot of opportunity to make incredible new games using AI technology, games that haven't existed before. I think a good designer, entrepreneur could look at this and say, okay, let's have some fun. Let's make things that people are going to enjoy and get the product out there. I think that artists, designers, entertainers, musicians actually have the advantage in this field because we work with social and emotional intelligence on a daily basis. That's what we do. If you're writing music, if you're a composer, if you're a painter, if you're a writer, these are things that we deal with all the time. Story arcs, characters, emotional storytelling. And those, I think, are going to be the most valuable things to bring to the field of AI, not necessarily just to be able to code, because a lot of people are going to be able to code. But I think what becomes more interesting is to bring artistic insight into these new products. So I really want to encourage artists, designers, entertainers, musicians, especially comedians, to start getting involved with these AI products, because it's the knowledge that you have of what makes something funny or what makes something fun that is going to shine in these new products. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about is statistical mediocrity. And what does that mean? One of the things you notice as you start to work with AI is that it's ultimately a statistical tool. And when you run something through an AI, it winds up giving you its best statistical analysis of maybe what something is, or what the best choice might be, or it might generate something new. But ultimately, that's based upon a statistical analysis. We have 95% confidence that this is a picture of a cat, or I can give you 98% confidence that this looks like a car. And that's really interesting. There's a whole lot of value in that. However, what that means is that it's constantly trying to statistically analyze things towards the most common denominator. And so it tends to be a blandification machine. It tends to want everything to sort of be the most bland, most common type of result that could come out. And that has a lot of value, but it's also really, really boring. So if you were to look at, for instance, 100,000 pictures of cars and then train a model to generate a new car for you, it might look the most like every car out there. That's not necessarily a great new design. You can analyze a whole bunch of jokes, but is it going to make a new joke that's funny? We don't really know. And if you think about design, frequently it's the ones that stand out that are the most interesting, not necessarily the ones that are just like all the other ones. And so this becomes sort of an interesting challenge when you're working with AI, is how can you generate either mistakes or oddities or glitch, basically. How can you glitch an AI to create something that's really interesting, that's not just the most average of everything? So we start to think about how can we generate unpredictability and texture, in particular in the realm of the character or the personality that you're interacting with. So is it really boring to always have the exact same Alexa character talking to you in an extremely predictable way, or is it interesting to have that vary a little bit? Should it have moods that change during the day? Should it maybe every now and then make a mistake and then correct itself very quickly? Or should it take longer to respond or shorter to respond? Now, how can we generate this type of texture within that character as well as unpredictability? And the unpredictability thing gets back to what I was saying about companion mode, in allowing it or programming it to make decisions periodically on its own without input. And what this leads to is this idea that I called mixed intelligence. So that's combining AI with human input. And that may be ultimately the most valuable area here. So you can think of this in terms of mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality. So in the same way that you'll have artificial intelligence and you have human intelligence, when you combine those together, you might wind up with the type of experience that has the right texture and the right experience for people to really appreciate and enjoy that. We don't need to necessarily think about artificial intelligence as just being its own thing off on the side. We want it to be this mixed intelligence. And so I think we're going to start to hear more about this idea of mixed intelligence moving forward.